Welcome to Renos for Pros and Joes. I'm Kendall, and I'm back with another installment of the Master Bathroom Remodeling Series. If you've been watching this series, then you know that the previous installment, I showed you how I was installing my shoe molding as well as painting my trim once I had everything installed. So in this video, I'm going to be installing the vanity lights for this Master Bathroom double vanity. And I'm also going to walk you through some things to keep in mind as you're doing this type of project or if you're considering doing it. Number one, always make sure that the power is off. And the next thing that you want to do is consider stretching before you get started. Frequently, you're going to be doing a replacement of fixtures over a vanity. You're going to have to stretch and lean over in order to access the work area, as you can see me doing here on both of these light fixtures. And so this is a less than natural position, and so you want to make sure that your shoulders and your back and your legs and everything are stretched out really good before you get started. As you can see here, I have two different ladders that I'm working on. I have a two-step ladder, which is not visible in the picture, but that's what I'm standing on right now. And I also have a 6-foot step ladder over there to the right. The next thing that you want to also be prepared for is that typically when you're installing vanity lights, you're going to always end up feeling like you wish you had 4 hands. This is the way that this always feels, and typically it's just not practical to have a second set of hands in there in a space where you're trying to work and install a light fixture. So the next thing that you always want to consider or expect is expect at least one surprise when you are replacing vanity lights. There's all types of things that can occur or you can discover while you're doing this type of project. Old work can be hard to remove. Particularly if you run into some stubborn screws that are really long and very difficult to back out of the existing rough end box in the wall. That's one of the things that I'm dealing with here in this remodel right here. And don't get me started about old and poorly installed rough end boxes, which is another scenario that I'm also working through on this project. So you'll see me periodically as I'm working here, you'll see the rough end box in the vanity area to the right is loose in the wall, and I had to go back and try and work through that. And so that's another complication that I had to deal with. Rough end boxes are usually blue, but if you go way back, they're metal. I even run into scenarios sometimes in replacing vanity fixtures where there's no rough end box in the wall at all and just a wire sticking through the wall. And typically this is not going to be something that you're going to notice until you actually get the fixture down. And that is why it's a surprise. And having to locate the center line of the vanity and then cutting a hole and then installing a rough end box before installing a light fixture is typically what's going to be required when you discover something like that. And so here I am over here working in the wall. You can see that I'm working around and pulling things out of the hole here. This is the one that's really, really loose. And you can see that rough end box is actually coming out of the wall, and I'm going to have to situate it back inside the wall. One good thing about this particular install was the fixtures that we're going to be installing actually have a wall plate that's mounted into the drywall with 4 screws to help alleviate a lot of the stress and pressure that will be put on a rough end box in this type of scenario. This brings me to my next point, which is that rough end boxes are not installed the same by every builder or contractor. Some locate the box and fasten it to a wall stud or something like that before the drywall is installed during construction or during a renovation, while others leave the wire in the wall and pull it through once the vanity cabinets and countertops are installed. This is a common technique when the exact location of the vanities has not yet been determined, or the size of a mirror has not yet been finalized, or a vanity fixture type has not yet been selected. This is likely why the property that I am working on right now has retrofit light boxes in the wall instead of the type that you would expect for new construction, as this is actually the first time that this bathroom has ever been remodeled. As I mentioned, these fixtures are attached to the wall using a wall plate, which is part of the fixture. Before the metal wall mounting plate for this vanity light can be installed, we have to first install the wall anchors. First, I'm going to drill my holes for the anchors and then install the anchors into each hole, which is what you see me doing there. I'm actually pushing the plastic anchors into each one of the holes that I've already drilled, just showing you where the ground wire is on that plate. And now I'm putting the plate into place, making sure that I've got my wires through each hole. And now I am screwing in each screw into the 4 holes. Before I do a final tighten on any of these screws, I'm going to get out my bullet level and make sure that that wall mounting plate is completely level, because that's what we were going to be using to mount the main fixture to. And if it's not level, then the fixture is not going to be level either. Please disregard the angle or ignore the angle that you see on this camera at this point in time. It looks like everything is out of level, but it's just a optical illusion. Everything's level. I've got my level there on top of the fixture there. As you see, I'm continuing to work through and just slowly tightening each one of these screws down until I've got it exactly the way that I want it. Once I get the screws in pretty close to where I want them, I do the final turns with a screwdriver by hand. This allows me to feel the tension on the screw and on the anchor to make sure that I'm not turning too far or too tight, because this can cause the anchor to shift or strip out or damage the drywall, which will ultimately affect the fit of the wall plate against the wall. It will then be loose. So I want to get it as tight as I can without damaging the fitting. And so when I turn the screwdriver and the drill, it causes the fins or the wings on the wall anchor to fan out on the rear side of the drywall. And this ultimately is what creates that snug connection that allows us to be able to attach the wall plate and the fixture ultimately without having to worry about it pulling through the wall. This is actually the same method or technique that's used to frequently hang pictures as well as mirrors. So as you can see here, I'm getting close to trying to install my light fixture, and the first thing I'm going to do here, because I'm working alone, I am tearing off my electrical tape and hanging it over there off to the side, so that when I get this fixture up here, I can easily just grab one of those pieces of tape to wrap around my wire nuts when the time is right. So now I've got my fixture up there. You can't really tell from the picture here, but this light fixture is actually already assembled. So that's another one of my pet peeves that I wanted to also express, is that I do not like working with open box or used fixtures. This is true for electrical and plumbing fixtures. There often end up being more problems than you'd normally run into if you just gotten the fixture brand new. And this one is no exception, because as you can see here, I'm having to push my arm against the fixture to hold it up against the wall, because I mentioned before, it's very, very heavy. And so I'm not familiar with this light fixture, and so I'm having to figure out how to assemble it because it did not come with any instructions. And one of the funny things about this is that there was two of these. One is the one that I'm working with now, which was a display model, and the other one was actually in a box that was unopened. However, even the unopened one did not have instructions in it, so I'm having to kind of figure this out on my own. And as I mentioned before, the glass crystals on this fixture are extremely heavy. I'm going to show you exactly what they look like when I open up the other box so you can see what I'm talking about. But even looking back at this thing in retrospect, I really would not have wanted to remove those glass crystals to work through this process right here that I'm going through now. It would have probably made things easier, but it's just kind of one of those things that it's really a pain to deal with, and you often don't want to deal with it more than once. And so right now I am screwing in the little screws that hold the mounting plate to the fixture, and this is ultimately what keeps the fixture from falling off of the wall. So I'm having to do that by hand. Had some little minor issues with dealing with that. As I said, I cannot stress enough that if you're buying open box or used fixtures, expect to have even more surprises, and you may or may not be able to work them out. So I've got my level on there, got everything done, and now we're about to start installing these light fixtures, or these light bulbs. Another thing to keep in mind with installing these vanity lights is that when you have fixtures like this that have clear glass, you're going to have to buy a higher end light bulb. Some of them are going to be Edison style bulbs, others are going to be just the clear type, but they're all substantially more expensive than just a run-of-the-mill light bulb. So as you can see here, there's one light bulb and one fixture housing that just will not secure the bulb properly to stay on right here. So I'm just kind of trying to work through that issue right here. Venting, and read my lips, no open box fixtures. That's right. So we've got this one working. Just wanted to go back and double check everything to make sure everything is exactly the way that we want it before we move on to the next one. And so one of the reasons why you see that I have both light fixture housings opened up at the same time instead of doing them one by one is that I am fully aware and expecting to run into some type of issue as I'm working through the installation of these fixtures. And so I want to run into all the problems as early as possible so that I can work through them and move forward to the next step. Frequently, when you're doing this type of work, you're going to run into scenarios where you're going to end up having to go back to the store, and you want to make sure that you're able to make less trips back. So here's the other fixture. Here is what it looks like without the crystals in it, and you can see it has these tiny little screws on the top of this fixture. This is what's holding these big crystals in place, and there's no rubber connections on any of these crystals. The crystal is just sitting on a little groove cutout on the top and bottom of each one of these crystals, and that's what holds it in place. So it's pretty ticklish, and so that's why I said before, I'm definitely glad that I just went ahead and installed that open box one the way that it was. So you can see that notch out at the top at the bottom. That's where the little screw sits to hold it in, and it's not extremely tight connection there. So I'm holding that up so you can see that. Hopefully you can see how thick that is. That is really, really heavy glass. And so it looks really beautiful, but it is a little bit precarious when you're trying to install these things and you're up on a ladder and you're having to do all this stuff by hand, and then you're trying to finagle with the little metal piece and the small screws, which are actually not visible from the front. So you actually have to get up on top above the fixture to be able to see everything good. And typically on a fixture like this, I would not use a drill like this, but based on the location of it as well as just the complexity of installation, it's better for me to screw this thing in faster to secure the panel rather than trying to finagle with a screwdriver and make multiple rotations and risk dropping the screw or having to shift the glass crystal. So it just makes things easier. Plus, the drill that I'm using here is not an overly powerful one, so I'm not nearly as concerned about stripping out the threading on the metal screw for that fixture. So I'm getting everything started first by hand to make sure that I don't have any cross threading, and then I go back with the impact driver there and screw it in to tighten it down to the way that I want it. So there I am right there putting the final rotations on that to make sure that I've got it exactly the way that I want it and make sure that it is squared up. Needless to say, guys, these fixtures have 10,000 fingerprints on them now, just based on the way that they have to install it. So maybe going forward, I would have tried to have some white gloves or something like that. I was actually surprised that these didn't come with white gloves, because I have actually installed fixtures that did come with cotton gloves. Everything from shower heads to ceiling fans. If they're chrome and things like that are really shiny, sometimes they come with that. Well, there we have it, guys. Both fixtures are in and looking marvelous. Hopefully you found this video informative. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next one.